Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Near Memo with David Mihm, Mike Blumenthal, me, Greg Sterling, and today our friend Ran Fishkin is back for an encore performance. And we'll be talking about a lot of interesting things tied into his predictions for 2026 and adjacent issues. Welcome, Ran. Thanks for being on again. It's always
Yeah,
great to
my
have you.
pleasure. Always great
I
to be
would
here
like to
with you.
think of it as a second act rather than an encore. That way we can get them back again. Then we have an encore.
All right. Okay. So among the predictions that you made earlier, I don't know when it was precisely, but not too long ago, you talked about 5 big marketing trends. I don't think we want to talk about all of them equally because we don't have enough time, but I'll just repeat them for the sake of the audience, and we'll link in the show notes to the post. AI usage is going to slow, yet there'll be continuing corporate pressure for employees to adopt and for companies to adopt. AI sentiment tracking is inherently unreliable, and people are disproportionately investing in that and under investing in other areas. There's a credibility crisis happening to some degree online. We're starting to see more and more content written for algorithms and less for humans, more and more AI abstraction of content and summaries and so on and so forth, and then more um, zero click experiences becoming the majority of online journeys. So that was not a great summary of your predictions, let's just say. But let's jump into the issue of people investing in all these AI visibility tools. You did some really pretty compelling research on that issue, on their reliability, on their ability to consistently show where people were appearing or not appearing. Why don't you elaborate on that, and let's get into that a bit.
Yeah, so basically, I had this theory, a starting theory, which I like to do with research and experimentation, which was that tracking AI tools' responses to suggested products or services or brands was entirely baloney, and that it was entirely baloney because the randomness of the combination of three things, basically the results, the sort of statistical lottery of words that frequently come after other words, the spicy autocomplete of how AI tools are built and how they respond, would randomize things to such a degree that it would be difficult to track your brand's presence. The second one is that each time you ask an AI, it comes up with a new answer, right? And so what are the differences between API calls? Do they do any caching? Are users in different countries and different regions getting different answers? What about personalization? All that kind of stuff. And in addition to those two challenges, how frequently are the results changing, right? So like with that amount of randomness, my assumption was, you ask an AI something 1,000 times and you get back 1,000 different responses, and it's just chaos. What we found when we actually did this work, and I really appreciate there were 600 volunteers who basically went and ran the same prompt through their Claude or ChatGPT or Google AI. And then they copied and pasted the responses into a survey form. And we did analysis on which brands showed up. Obviously, every single response was different every time, right? So like what they say in the response looks different. But the brands that show up do have much more consistency than I was expecting. And essentially what we discovered is that no, Rand is wrong. You can track brand presence, like the percent of the time that a certain brand shows up or doesn't in AI responses around a topic with some degree of reasonableness, so long as you sort of conform to some statistical requirements, like running a prompt a certain number of times, not assuming that all models are the same, recognizing that things usually change about week over week, not day over day, and then getting prompts that are actually representative of the real problems that people have. So it's possible. Rank tracking is full baloney.
And I will say, I read your results with great interest as somebody who has a couple of medical clients. I think one of your questions was cancer treatment on the West Coast or something like that. So I was very interested to see that. Frankly, the usual suspects who you would have expected to see were present, quote unquote. And so I don't know I don't know exactly how you would describe it, but sort of statistically significant visibility presence.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, is it really all that useful to know that, yes, I'm there with my peers roughly 75% of the time? Like that's I think that that's what you would expect. Frankly, it's better than what you'd get in Google, where the medical results tend to be dominated by Mayo and Cleveland Clinic and Johns Hopkins and like a handful of other government sites. Like, great, okay, well, at least I'm getting visibility among my peers. I think that I couldn't agree more with your sort of overall thesis that for the amount of money being spent and the amount of sort of, executive hemming and hawing over how are we showing up in AI, there's not a lot of there from where I sit. So.
Yeah, I think that's a fair conclusion. I would say that if what you're doing is investing in a campaign to show up more in AI tools, and over time you are using the sort of statistical visibility methods that we talked about in our research with Gumshoe, no matter what tool you're using, or if you're tracking it yourself or you built your own thing, Claude can build a pretty good tracker for you. Yeah, like, right? So long as you are conforming to those stats and paying attention, you can say, hey, 6 months ago, we were visible 60% of the time. Now we're visible 75% of the time. And you have made progress and you're doing something real. But should you be paying, profound $50,000 a month for that? I don't think so, man. I'm really skeptical about those. The big enterprise ones feel like a scam to me.
I have two questions about this. One is, what was the distribution of AI of clients that was used? What percentage was across which product? Is the first question. The second question is, what happens when brand gets writ small to a locale, right? How would this research had to have changed to understand that?
Yeah, great question. So first one, very easy. We only use 3 tools and we use the same model every time. So it was Google AI overviews, or if an AI overview didn't show, we asked people to click on mode. So you're getting the overview and sometimes AI mode, and only the first response, no second prompt, no further types of things. And that's true across all the models. And then we used Claude's latest opus, whatever it was at the time, right?
4.5,
December
4.4,
of
whatever,
2025, and ChatGPT 5.2, I think, was the model that was running in November, December of 2025. Those are the only models we used. To the second question,
But was it roughly equally distributed amongst your 600 users?
Exactly. So we asked 100 people, and between 69 and 90 of them sort of filled out each thing. So each prompt got run between about 65 and 90 times on each of the different platforms. So you're getting pretty substantial amounts of data. And you can see from the stats analysis, right, that if you ran it 1,000 times instead of 65 times, you would barely get any more accuracy. But on the second question, which is a fascinating one, right? What happens when the list of possible brands is quite small and limited to a geographic area? And we did this, I think, with a couple examples, but one I remember really well is LA Volvo dealers. So we asked in the greater Los Angeles area, what are the best Volvo dealerships, to buy my car from? And there are, I counted on Google Maps, I believe, somewhere between 9 and 11 total Volvo dealerships in greater Los Angeles County that you could buy a Volvo from. Only 8 of them ever appeared, ever, across all 3 models. Maybe Claude had a 9th a couple of times. But so to the point of, no, what if I'm one of the 3 who's completely invisible? Yeah, well, you should probably figure out why that's happening. And the top 4, I think, were dramatically overrepresented. Like, they were present north of 70% of the time. And then you have like these other 5 or 6 that are, much more invisible. So it's a real thing. AI visibility is a real thing. It's not that dissimilar to the early days of ranking in Google Maps or Google Local, right? Where like, gosh, these guys always show up and these guys are always pretty invisible. What's going on? And in AI, I think it's even more problematic because, as you guys know, right, in Local or Maps or whatever, you can click next, right? Or you can go to the full thing, or you can scroll down and you can see more LA Volvo dealerships. And even if you're one of the ones always at the bottom, at least you're in there. With AI, you'd have to hope that the user says, are there any more that you forgot about?
Right.
Well, I was going to ask, I thought the question Mike was asking, and maybe I misheard or whatever, but like, I'm curious to know how many local searches you guys had your panel do where there was not a particularly finite set of brands. So instead of Volvo dealers in LA, personal injury lawyers in LA, there's several hundred, right? And my experience anecdotally, which kind of resonates with your sort of hypothesis before running the research, is when I've done these searches and had friends across the country do these searches, and Mike does them and Greg does them, even the same exact prompt, we get not just quantitatively different results, i.e., the firms differ, but a lot of times we get qualitatively different results. Sometimes there's a map. Sometimes it says, oh, check these bar association directories, and here's FindLaw, and here's super lawyers. And other times it's just a list of 6 or 8 firms. And so I think that the variability seems to increase actually if you're looking at a pool of, dozens to hundreds of local brands who are relevant for a prompt, as opposed to when there's only 11 or whatnot.
And sometimes Gemini will say to me, there are no professional golf courses near the Volvo dealers. And I have never searched for professional golf courses, but there's somebody in our work group who does. And the question is, how does this happen? Right?
Yeah. One thing I would point out about our research, David, that we did do as sort of a follow-up, right? I realized the same thing you did, which was, gosh, how do people actually structure their queries? Like, I gave them whatever, these 15 or 16, prompts that were very specific so that they would return lists of brands consistently so that we could measure this. But that's not how people naturally do it. And so we asked one B2C and one B2B. We asked a couple hundred people in the panel, kind of at the very end of the research, would you please imagine yourself in a situation where you want to buy some headphones for a family member or friend for the holidays? How would you structure your prompt? Like, what prompt would you send to ChatGPT or Google AI mode or whatever? And then just write that down. And we asked for a B2B one as well, which I'm forgetting now exactly what it was. But those two produced more than 150 unique prompts. As you can imagine, every single one was different. The only good news here, the only good news from a brand perspective and a tracking perspective, is that an extremely high number, north of 95% of them, did produce one or more brands in the list. So like to your example where it said, oh, you should just go check FindLaw. We did not find that when people structured their own prompts and then we ran those prompts, which is somewhat good news. Like, it seems like when the intent is, I want to find something to buy, or I'm looking for a good service provider, the AI tools do produce lists of brands most of the time.
On this query string, what is fascinating to me is the dialectic of learning and machine that will go on. And we see this in our research where sometimes queries are just the craziest queries we've ever seen. And that the more people get into it, the crazier they're going to get. It seems to me that as time goes on and they learn, they can ask a 3-paragraph query. They will.
One of the things that strikes me,
they'll append facets to the end of their already crazy query. They'll just say, okay, and now do this, and then now do this, and then now do this, which I think is like, it's very the text is already up there in the Google search box. Like, sure, I'm just going to add a couple more terms.
In contrast to Google, where you have a ranking and you get pretty consistent rankings, if you do best PI lawyer, Orange County, California, or something like that, you're going to get some consistency, pretty consistent. With AI, as we're describing, there may be a number of candidates, businesses, brands that satisfy the query. Let's say there are 10, 15 that are acceptable. There are a bunch of plumbers that could do the work. There are a bunch of Volvo dealers that could sell you the car. There's that inconsistency is interesting to me because I'm looking for a plumber that's going to install my faucet, and 3 or 5 out of 7 may be perfectly fine. And so this one is going to show up this time. I'm going to go validate the reviews on Google, and I'm going to call that person. Whereas somebody else might get a different result and call, in the local pack, it's going to be pretty rigid, or the LSAs that show up. And you're going to get business funneled to the same people most of the time, or disproportionately to the people that are ranking. And that's not going to happen as readily, it seems to me, in an AI context.
So basically what I'm showing is a chart which, in the show notes, I realize you guys will point to this research, but this particular graph is showing the number of unique brands that were mentioned in the responses, which goes to what Greg and David have just been talking about. And essentially what you're seeing here, right, is that it really depends. Like it hugely depends on the query space and the intent space. So in the LA Volvo dealership example, right, where there's only whatever 11 Volvo dealerships that exist in the greater LA area, and only 9 of them showed up across the 83 responses in ChatGPT and Google and Claude. But sci-fi novels, right? We asked like, hey, recommend some science fiction novels from the last few years that people might like. And 11 unique sci-fi novels were mentioned across 99 responses. Like, it's just crazy. It's wackadoodle. It's all over the place. You know, there's a couple of sci-fi novels that have more visibility than everything else because they're very popular and well-known and sold really well and whatever. But my God, like that long tail is huge. And
Right.
sometimes those long tail ones are the ones that are mentioned first.
Right. Does
The
this
other thing
then
that's
become
interesting,
more?
go ahead, Greg.
Well, I was just going to say, does this then become a more ironically democratic medium versus Google?
I think the answer to that is maybe, but it's just a different sort of ranking system. Like one thing I think that's probably important to realize, and I had some skepticism around this too, right? But people keep publishing on this topic where they say Google visibility often is related to, but not fully overlapping with AI visibility. In the Volvo dealership example, those 9 dealerships also tend to rank well in Google Maps and local,
Yeah.
you know, and the normal search results. In the case of those sci-fi novels, I didn't see, you guys can check, but I didn't see a single novel ranking at all. There's no like one page on Penguin Random House or Amazon that ranks really well for sci-fi novels or best sci-fi novels of 2025. It's all lists, right? It's like, you know, Publishers Weekly has a list, Esquire has a list, Reader's Digest has a list of good books.
The sources are more distributed and fragmented than in
Yeah,
local business.
it's just
That's
really,
good for SparkToro's business model, it seems like, right? Like what you need to know what the lists are that you got to be mentioned on. So
this is, you know, we sort of think about the influencing audiences through things that may not drive traffic as being our primary goal. Like we're supposed to tell you what your people do on the internet and where and who they are. And that feels very important to me as we move forward in digital marketing, whether it's SparkToro or your own research or anything else. Like as you mentioned, Greg, like one of my big theories here is just that in the long-term future, we are going to be more and more in the platforms. That's where all the visibility, important visibility is going to come from, rather than how do I get my link to rank high in whatever platform and then drive traffic to my website.
Well, let's
I have a quick
go ahead,
question here.
Mike.
Just that Google has a unique advantage in local in that they have this huge knowledge graph of everything from businesses down to products and services. And, you know, and I did a search the other day where I put somebody's name in from a case I'm working on, review fraud. And they said the only place this person's name is mentioned is in this one review, and there's no other mention of this person. And they told me it was from a review source. I didn't ask if it was from a review source. I just said, what do you know about these names? And is there any mention of them in Colorado? And it said, oh, this is from a Google review, and that's the only place we see it. But the question is, how much is that going to that's an advantage both from a marketing side, but also from a technical side, that having that structure.
I think it is helpful, but possibly replicable with enough time and money and effort from OpenAI or Microsoft or somebody like that. What I don't think is replicable, Mike, is the clickstream data that Google has about what people are happy and unhappy with in search results over decades. That data, as the Department of Justice case showed us, right? Like that is the number one ranking factor. It is the most critical thing that gives Google this huge advantage. I don't know
Which you've
how
been saying for 20
ChatGPT
years, if not maybe
Yeah.
10, whatever.
right? Like they know that these 4 Volvo dealerships, when they send people to their websites, people buy Volvos on those sites and like transact with them. And when they send people to these other places, they're not as happy. And so they put the ones up there that make people happy, and that makes people addicted to using Google. And you know, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, but like when you look at the data research and you see what happened in Q4, where ChatGPT basically stops growing, flattens out, and declines in usage, and Gemini starts to eating their lunch, I think that fruit is coming to bear.
Well, that's entirely a byproduct of Google's monopoly position in search and with these other products. And
But
we don't want to go down. Gemini's gotten much better for sure.
yes, Gemini's gotten much better.
Yeah.
And Google has this huge advantage of being able to like put it in front of you, sort of the same way Instagram was able to make threads bigger than Twitter over the last couple of years by throwing threads into everybody's Instagram and forcing people to sign up. Well, nudging people to sign up in pretty compelling ways. But I would say, right, that like the narrative that was so dominant in LinkedIn feeds among lots of influential marketers over the last couple of years of like, ChatGPT is going to crush Google. ChatGPT is going to take over search. Google's over. Bet against them. That looks like pretty dumb advice to me these days.
Here's the truth of that statement, though. What people like is the UI, the UX of AI, generative AI. People really like the conversational nature of that, the ability to ask follow-up questions. That is what people prefer to traditional Google search. Now, Google has integrated that into search now, or is increasingly integrating that into search. But when ChatGPT first came out, and it was like old Google versus ChatGPT, that comment had more credibility, even though it was naive in some respect, because of the transformative nature of that user experience. And
I always felt the opposite. You guys tell me if I'm crazy. But
firstly,
theory,
that's a given, Brand. Now, if you're crazier, we can go there.
Yeah. Just how crazy is Rand? No, but my theory around this was like, ChatGPT's interface felt to me like Ask Jeeves of the late 90s. Like you formulated a question, you gave details, you're supposed to structure this big thing like, hey, I'm looking for a new Volvo in the LA area, maybe the XC60 or 90. I want something that has a plug-in charge hybrid. I want it to have less than this many miles. I want the dealership to be offering some sort of rebate or incentive. And you can give all that information right to ChatGPT, kind of like how you could to Ask Jeeves. And then in a butler service-like way, it will, give you responses and whatever. And then Google came around and innovated and was like, hey, all you have to do is enter Volvo dealerships. You don't got to say nothing else. We'll get it for you, right? And it was like, ooh.
I don't want to debate this, but yes, you're crazy.
Okay, all right.
I think that ChatGPT and Gemini and the others
crazier.
Can be really frustrating to use at times because they're so verbose, right? Sometimes you just want the information, but Google can be also incredibly inefficient to use. Depends on where you are in the funnel and what you're looking for. If I'm looking for Italian restaurant near me, Google, totally, 100%. If I'm doing your query, I have all these criteria, ChatGPT is going to be, or Gemini is going to be a lot easier and better to use than going back to Google and again and refining and clicking back. It's just become super inefficient in certain higher funnel contexts. That's my
I was thinking about this the other day, that because of the way these fan out, I can do one query on ChatGPT or Gemini where I would have had to have done 10 before. That they know the fan out I'm likely to use, and they're bringing information from this broad range. So in that sense, the environmental impact is probably less than my son and wife accuse me of.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I will say about the AI usage is I think it's hard to read the research that we just did, right? That produces all these like sort of lists of brands and ever trust one response from an AI again. What I've found is that after doing this research, I now, for example, I'm currently hunting for a pair of classic men's shoes. Like I want Oxfords and I want the like rubber soles because it's wet and rainy in the Pacific Northwest, but I still want nice shoes. And so rather than like if I ask ChatGPT or I ask Google AI Overview, I don't trust answer one. I hit refresh. Like I go and ask again and again and again, and I get more lists of different brands that come up, right? And then I'm like, okay, after about 10 responses, I know that I've mostly exhausted the list of brands, but any one response is going to be not wrong, but incomplete. And that makes me so frustrated. Like it makes me frustrated to have this knowledge. It's almost a curse, like a Pandora's box of knowing how AI works now and realizing that anytime I ask, I kind of have to ask 10 times if I really want to get a thorough response.
Oh, can I ask a segue here, Greg?
Yes,
Not to hijack,
yes, please.
Okay,
No,
so
please.
this is but I think it's a perfect example. So to talk about this, so let's say, Rand, you do these sort of recursive searches or whatever you want to call them to get your complete, set of considerations or whatever. What do you do once you have, let's say, 2 or 3 potential candidates of things you actually want to buy. What would you do in that scenario?
I mean, then I sort of have my knowledge that I have collected and I go to those websites and
directly to the websites.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're
He's
you're
talking
going
about
to
shoes, though.
you're going to aldo.com and then searching on aldo.com for the name of the shoe, or how, like?
Well, so this is the other frustrating thing, right? Like, once this happened to me last night because of this hunt, right? Like, Google gave me a list. There were a few Japanese shoemakers that I was actually very interested in. When I had to ask ChatGPT, or sorry, I think I was using Google AI mode, and I was like, hey, thank you for recommending these. Like, now I need the links. Like, can you please link to the shoe on the website? And as I'm sure you're aware, 7 out of 10 of those links worked great, and 3 out of 10 of them went to a 404 or like whatever.
Well, so this is the segue here, is that which I don't disagree with, your prediction that zero click is kind of going to increase and increase and increase. And I think that that's certainly true for all of the consideration phase, the 10 searches that you did, right? Where you might have actually visited 22 websites before you came up with your final 3 choices. But that at the end of the day, that what is the click? Like, where is the click happening? Where is the purchase happening, right? And I feel like, go ahead.
No, I 100% agree with where you're going, David. I agree that just because we live in a zero-click world more and more does not mean sales are going away.
Okay.
At the end of the day, at the end of this process, a shoe or several will still be purchased. A Volvo dealership in LA will still get someone's business. Several sci-fi novels will still be purchased on a Kindle or, over Amazon. That's not going away. I don't think commerce is ending. I think the discovery, the attention earning, the audience influencing, the audience building, all of those phases which happened historically on your website are being disintermediated and will now happen on platforms you don't own and control. And so that old advice of not building on rented land, which I gave on stage for 20 years, that's now dead wrong. You must build on the rented land where your audience's attention exists, or you will lose.
And it raises the question about the locus of the transaction. If you've got the agentic commerce profile and the universal commerce profile, and there's a movement, a migration of sales, it hasn't happened, but this is where Google wants to take it. I mean, this is Google's revenge against Amazon, right? For years and years, it tried to compete with Amazon. It couldn't do its own checkout process, but now here it is. And their merchant center and all the product data they have a really good shot at really kind of going at Amazon here. And so the customer, reduces everything to a commodity. I mean, the brand still matters because you still prefer shoe A to shoe B, but it matters the whole brand presentation and the look and feel and the user experience on the website and everything that was part of that sort of goes away and becomes standardized on some third-party platform where the transaction is happening.
Yeah, I think this is it's sort of the logical end game of the American cultural approach to commerce, which is basically everything is big. Big is the thing that matters most. Reduce the number of brands and number of uniqueness, and you can feel it in sort of American culture across the board, right? Our architecture has all become the same because getting a license for an apartment building that looks any different from the 10 models that have been approved by boards is super hard. And so let's just build one of these ones. Strip malls all look the same. The number of unique stores, restaurants, bars, shoe shops, bakeries, whatever, in any location in the United States has been cut by 90% since the 80s, I think. So like it's this reduction in uniqueness toward a singular commercial culture. And I think Google and Amazon and OpenAI and Claude, they're all trying to get to that point where they become the one place where you not only do all your research, but also finalize the transaction. I don't know how successful that'll be and when it'll be successful.
That's what I was hoping. I wanted your prediction on that exact question. When will true agentic commerce be a real thing? That's my question.
It's so not. I feel like, David, we could maybe in 2 years have a real prediction around that once these like protocols get adopted or don't get adopted or change, or Google tries to force them into the shopping function and no one adopts them or whatever. Like, I need some data before I could make a prediction. It wouldn't surprise me.
You can do it like you do with fusion reactors, 5 to 10 years, David. It's always going to be 5 to 10 years.
When is Tesla gonna, be number one in the car sales market? Just a couple years. Like that'll happen.
Yeah. Well,
So
part of the reason I bring it up on the agentic commerce side is that we do Google is making a real push these days, and I haven't seen it in ChatGPT, probably because I don't have the sort of knowledge graph that Mike was talking about. But we see in a lot of different categories now, like have AI check prices, or they've had duplex for a long time, like book a table at the restaurant through their open table, MCP or whatever it is, right? So I actually see this, potentially happening first in local, where it's maybe more of a known commodity, right? Like, okay, yeah, I know what it's like to book a table. I don't actually need to deal with all this crap. I'm going to have the agent do it. I do think though, at the end of the day, hopefully people still have taste. Like, no, I actually need to know that this shoe is actually what I want. I'm not sure I'm going to trust a robot to actually go and buy it for me. So.
Well, in a hopeful note, just to interject this, there was a study of 3,000 people in the US, UK, and Canada that found that the proportion of consumers who shop online daily fell 12 points year over year, with more people going back into stores. So that's a hopeful note. I just want to throw that in. So in the last few minutes that we have here, and we've really just scratched the surface on some of these topics. Let's talk about measurement. How do you figure out what's working in the future? Let's talk about what does it mean now, performance marketing versus brand marketing. This has been a big debate since the Google antitrust trials, obviously. Build your brand gets clicked on, Google will reward that. What do you see happening in those two arenas? Measurement, the reliability of measurement, to come back to our first topic, and then this idea of brand building on other channels versus performance marketing.
Yeah, I think this is a quite interesting era for analytics and measurement, because essentially what's happened is the first quarter century of digital marketing was all about treating everything digital as perfectly trackable and therefore attributable, right? Like, I know that this blog post was seen by these people who then later came back to the website and signed up for the email list in this proportion. And of those, here's how many converted to customers and here's their lifetime value. So therefore, this is how much that blog post is worth and how much more effort we should put into it. That era of content marketing and all organic digital marketing behaving like performance is being thrown out the window in a world where, ChatGPT does not report to you how many times your brand showed up, with what sentiment, in what, level of visibility. And so therefore you might start showing up at the top of a high intent, commonly used sort of set of prompts, and you see a spike in sales and you're like, what happened? I have no idea. I don't, unless you're tracking all the platforms, I was separately tracking my Instagram mention visibility, and I have, I don't want to say, well, I'm going to say Alert Mouse because Google Alerts doesn't work anymore, right? But something that's tracking web alerts like that, something that is tracking your visibility on Instagram and YouTube and Reddit and all these kinds of places, so that you actually know when you get talked about in some place, even though there's no link. Very frequently, there's no link. We see this with SparkToro all the time. This is a few months ago, we were featured in a very popular TikTok video. I had no idea because I don't monitor TikTok, and it's hard to see in there. And someone sent me the video, and it's like, oh my God, 500,000 views. And here's this guy being like, SparkToro is the answer to doing this and this and this. Holy crap. No wonder we saw this crazy ass, sign up spike that week. The measurement, the ability to say, what was that TikTok video worth to us? We don't know, right? It's really tough. It's all time series measurement. It's gone back to brand. It's just like how you would measure a billboard that you put up on the highway in 1965. Like, what does same store sales do in the 10-mile radius around that billboard? What's the lift compared to the billboard you ran across town and the 10-mile radius around that one? That's how you're measuring and attributing.
Except in those examples, specifically where that billboard is. So there's a sort of fixed point to measure, right? I feel like you were just saying, you didn't know where the TikTok billboard was. All of a sudden it just happened. So,
yep.
So Google always benefited from the delusion of accuracy, and they're not going to be able to offer that anymore. How do you see that affecting the
Why,
marketing
Mike? Why
decisions.
won't they be able to offer that anymore?
Well,
They'll still be.
because your last clicks are dropping. I mean, they're plummeting off the page. That's why.
I think they're gonna really lose out from the organic perspective, but I think on the paid side, that's where they're gonna
Yes.
be right there. Because what Google is amazing at, and this is true for Meta as well, is they know what you're gonna buy and where you're gonna buy from long before you actually do it, because they have so much behavioral data from history, and they're like, hey, Rand's investigating all these shoes, but eventually he's going to spend $800 buying the Crockett and Jones ones from the UK, right? And like, I'm trying to find something like, nope, that's probably where I'm going to end up buying and whatever. And they know that. And so they're like, we should make sure that Crockett and Jones's ads show to Rand, even if he never actually sees them, like he doesn't even know that he's necessarily seeing them in his feed, or like he scrolls past it too quickly or whatever, because then we can take credit for that sale when he eventually buys. And that is happening across the web. And Google is amazing. And they have convinced executives, CMOs, and especially CFOs that having that data of your Google ad was seen by this person who eventually made this purchase is a winning combination. And unfortunately, a ton of these execs are unwilling to do the only thing that you can do in this scenario, which is to test turning off your ads and seeing how many people would have bought anyway.
There's too much fear.
Too much fear of what if our quarterly results are slightly down because of that? I won't hit my target. I'll be fired. Like, people aren't willing to even try it.
What about local businesses, though? So these guys have been hit by, oh, you got to be in all these places. You got to be in Reddit. You got to be in TikTok. You got to be on Instagram. You got to be over on Google, and you got to be on Facebook. And they do what they can. Some of them are very sophisticated. We've encountered some very, very sophisticated local businesses. Others are just sort of trying to make it work, and they're doing what they sort of instinctively, oh, my customers told me this. And there's just no way for them to do the kind of scientific elimination diet kind of advertising testing that you're describing. There's just no chance. So they're going to stick with what they
don't need to do it, right? At their scale, that's just not that important. And I do really disagree with the like Gary Vaynerchuk, you have to be everywhere, you have to be always posting across all these things. You know what? I'm going to say what we all know, which is like, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of your audience's attention is in 20% of these platforms. If you're a Volvo dealership, Google and Google Local, maybe a little bit of AI visibility now, like that really matters. TikTok, Instagram, I don't think it matters that much. Reddit, maybe a little bit. YouTube, possibly a little bit. Do you need to be on Pinterest? No. Do you need to be on Threads? No. Do you need to be on Twitter? No. Like, you can exclude a ton of these things and pick the top 2 or 3. And if you're really good at those, you're going to do great.
Okay, let me challenge you on this for a second. Where do you build your brand today?
Yeah.
Is that a local question, Greg, or is that a national question?
It's a general question, but with an emphasis on local.
The right answer to all marketing questions, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, is always, it depends. Right? And this is one where it depends. And the only way I can answer this truly accurately, Greg, is to say it's the combination of 3 things. You want to find the intersection of these 3 Venn diagram or 3 circles in a Venn diagram. One is, where is your audience actually paying attention, right? On this particular topic. Not, are they going to Facebook? Sure, they're going to Facebook, but are they paying attention to your topic on Facebook or Instagram or Reddit or TikTok or Google or AI overviews or whatever? The second one is, what are you really good at? Because you know what? If you suck at Instagram and you're just having a terrible time, like, don't put your energy there. Even if your audience is there, that's not going to be your focus. But if you're great at sort of the like local maps optimization and getting into AI overviews and being at the top of Google search results, good enough. Like, that's going to be really good enough to focus your attention. And then the third one that I think is important is an area where you can have a unique value proposition and something your competition doesn't have. Like, you can do it uniquely better than your competition. So you care about this space, you're good at it, you have passion and interest in it, your audience is actually there, and you can do something unique, competitively unique. Focus on that. Ignore the rest. Don't try and be in every channel if you're a local business.
All right.
And that may only reflect That doesn't need to be your whole business. That's just your digital business, right? I mean, it's like, this is what meets that criteria. I'm still going to sell all these different brands of Oxfords, but this is the one that I know Rand's going to buy. So I'm going to focus on this one online.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we don't. Great advice, Rand Fishkin. Thank you again for being on with
Thanks
us.
so much, Rand. Appreciate your time as
Yeah.
always.
Oh,
Yeah.
my
We'll have you
pleasure,
back
guys.
for the we'll have you back for the I think it'll be like the 5th act at this point. So
I can't wait.
thanks
I
so
look
much.
forward to it.
Well, maybe we should do it in innings then.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like the Tom Hanks on SNL. Just come back to host many times
Right.
as you want me.
Five timer.
Yeah.
All right.
Join the club.
All
Okay.
right.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Rand.
much. Bye.
Cheers, guys.